Hello everyone. Welcome to the lecture on career paths for public historians. As you can tell, I am not in a venue specifically designed for education. I am currently out of state at the moment. So, a lecture format will have to do. Which is fine because as public historians, there are a variety of venues in which you can work, and adjustment is key. As public historians, people with history degrees can work in any career that you can possibly think of. It's just simply not as obvious as, say, a chemical engineer or pharmaceuticals. Instead, public historians can work, of course, in academia as professors, as teachers, as researchers. But there are several different careers available. Information about these careers can be found in the American Historical Association's website. This website offers a great amount of information. There are two web pages actually for people with history degrees. One is careers for students of history, and the other is jobs in public history. For this assignment, I would look more into the careers for students of history, as it is a little bit more broader in scope, and it provides more detail as to the sort of jobs available. The careers for students of history first goes into the skills of professional historians and the importance of professional associations and the structure of the publication as it is. Within each little subtopic or subcareer, there's an overview of the field, the type of training it takes, what kind of jobs it would be available in that specific genre of work. Some even have recent trends in the job market and interviews with people who work in these jobs. Now, outside of classrooms and academia, historians could work in museums, in editing and publishing, in archives as archivists. Historians can work in historic preservation, federal, state, and local history. They can even work as consultants and contractors. Now, my goal is to show you what exactly is involved in these careers. Not necessarily specifics, just a broad understanding, because we have a limited time frame available to us. If you wish to work in a museum as a public historian, you will find that you will definitely have to have at least a bachelor's degree and experience. Now, the education requirement is pretty standard. However, the experience is something one can gain through internships and volunteer assignments. For instance, if you were to go to a local museum, you could simply ask for volunteer positions available and get that process started. It's often merely a application away. Museums typically will not refuse you. Now, as to the types of jobs that a historian would do in a museum, There's, of course, what's known as a curator or a digital archivist, even. Curators are responsible for putting exhibits together, doing the a little bit of outside research to put on the little plaques that you typically see in the museum. A lot of that is done by curators. A little bit more in depth, curators are also responsible for reporting back to their supervisors what the public opinion is of the exhibits. In turn, it lets people know in higher positions what the public wants to know. Is this history still relevant? Even. And being a public historian in a museum is not a thing of the past. It is actually very present. As I've stated, you can become a digital archivist, which is basically the same thing as a curator. You're just responsible for digitalizing material content. If you go to the British Museum of History website, you can look on their online collections and you see all these pictures of the artifacts found at archaeological excavations. That was done by public historians. Another occupation one will find in a museum is that of a museum educator. Most museums offer little programs where grade school students can come in and take their field trips. Those are often led by public historians. Outside of museums, historians can work in editing and publishing. Typically, this kind of job is set at university presses, publishing textbooks, sometimes journals and magazines like the National Geographic or the Smithsonian. The jobs typically assigned to public historians in this field have to do more with annotation and translations. The Perseus Tuft website, which is a collection of ancient and medieval works, or at least they date from that time, and they are works that have been translated by historians at a much later date. However, if you look at the bottom where the citation is typically placed at the end of the website, you'll see annotations made by newer or more recent historians. In textbooks, new editions are often accompanied by an introduction or a preface written by more contemporary historians as well, in which the recent historians provide annotations and just state how they are adding on to this work. Related to careers in museums, editing, publishing, and even in academia are the fields available in archives, historical preservation, in federal, state, and local history. So I will basically just tell you that it's still very relevant, but I am going to look more into an area a little bit more abstract. Historians as consultants and contractors. These are still related to the aforementioned careers. A contract historian who can often work in projects in historic preservation, archaeology, architectural history, historical architecture, landscape architecture, and litigation. This is relevant in that, say, a housing development wants to build on a specific piece of land wherein they find human remains. And this has actually happened before. In Ohio, I remember my grandmother telling me one of the neighbors' homesteads, when they started constructing the house, they actually found an Indian burial. And when I say neighbors, these are just people that they knew. But it turned out to be one of the mounds associated with I believe it was the Hopewell Indians. So historians were called in for archaeological excavation and preservation. So because of a public historian, a person's homestead could not be built there because it was a historically significant site. There's a little bit more into it than that, but you will find certain cases like that in conjunction with contract historians. Now, you will be surprised to find that public historians can find careers in the legal field. And this field sometimes crosses over with the contract business. As I've stated before, there are some legalities to be meted out when it comes to construction on historic sites. You'll even find in historic districts where houses can only be repainted in certain colors or materials being used. But also in the legal section of this career, a public historian is someone who could advise law firms on the legal precedents of certain cases. In the American Historical Association's webpage on careers for students of history, it states very clearly that law firms occasionally employ historical consultants to conduct research for litigation involving historical background material. Now, a few famous cases would stem from art, actually. The art stolen from Jewish people in Germany by the Nazis is a very significant study. Also, genealogical historians, when litigating wills, is imperative in some cases. The point is that there is actually no shortage of careers available to historians in academia or outside of academia for public historians. It is simply the difference in how one applies their knowledge of history that makes a difference in this case. I hope this has been a help. Signing off, Megan Shirley.